before we sell you the piece of technology, we need to understand what your business objectives are. If we understand what your business objectives are, that will have an impact upon the strategy that we build. And then the strategy we build needs to be reflected in the way that the solution is implemented.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Vineet, and we are really glad to have all of you join us today. On this show, we talk to CX and technology experts from around the world. We explore, uncover, and share fresh insights on creating experiences that your customers will remember and look forward to. Engati is the world's leading multilingual, no-code digital CX platform available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc. magazine, Tech World, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Ian Williams. He's a director and customer experience strategist at Jericho. So Ian, would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Nice to meet you, Vineet. Thank you very much for inviting me here on this on the Engati show, so to speak. Yeah, I set up Jericho, which is my business. Jericho is an independent customer experience consultancy, and I started that 11 and a half years ago. And since then, we have been working with a number of different organizations across multiple industries, working with organizations from both a technology perspective, but also independent of technology as well. So in addition to Jericho, which, as I said, I've been running for 11 years, there are a number of other little projects that I've been working on. One is something called CX Club. A CX Club is not a club, so to speak, as you would imagine it. It's a group on LinkedIn. It's a little bit of fun, really. It's creating a forum where people can debate about what represents good and bad customer experience. And it's themed around a film, one of my favorite films, which was called Fight Club, which is a film from about 20 years ago. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a friendly yet adversarial environment where people can openly debate about what good and bad customer experiences. So that's CX Club, and you can find CX Club against my profile on LinkedIn. And also during the lockdown period, I've been doing another little project called Project Lockdown, which was quite a lot of fun, where a number of CX practitioners from around the world got involved in creating an online band. So what we did is a number of us who are interested in music as well, all contributed our own individual parts and did a couple of online tunes. So we refer to ourselves as LinkedIn's first virtual rock band. Oh, so that was Project Lockdown as well. So yeah, there are a number of things that I've been working on, but of course Jericho is my main priority because that's where the work comes from.
That's great, Ian. So welcome to the show, Ian. We are so excited to talk to you today. But before we dive into our interview with Ian, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the globe. So Ian, getting back to our interview now, can you shed some light on the 11 customer experience principles?
If I spend time shedding light on the 11 customer experience principles, I think we'd be here for about 2 or 3 hours. So I'm not going to do that, Vineet. What I will do is just try and explain why those principles exist. Okay. If anybody's interested in more information about those principles, you can find out information. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got all the main social media channels, and there's probably about an hour's worth of material that goes into detail about what those 11 principles are. However, the important thing is why the principles exist. And one of the main reasons why the principles exist is because although customer experience has been a very popular subject within the last 15 to 20 years, it is still enormously misunderstood by most people. And therefore, myself and a number of other people like me in the CX world have felt it necessary to bring those principles into the world in order that we can do some really basic things like what's the difference between customer experience and customer service. Now, some people use those words interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. They are nowhere near the same thing. And therefore, one of the principles that we talk about is what's the difference between customer experience and customer service. And I think that's probably the most important principle of all of them. So let's dive a little bit into what the difference is. Now, we all understand customer service. You're an organization, you have customers. Those customers require service. Now, often you'll have a customer service department, and those people are responsible for, going into the, when the customer contacts the organization, those people in those departments are responsible for servicing the customer's needs, for helping the customer out. Okay. Now, it isn't just the responsibility of the people within the customer service department. You could argue that there are lots of different parts of the business that can provide the customer with a service. Yeah. So customer experience mainly owned by one function, but not exclusively. Whereas customer experience is completely different. It's not a function. It's not part of the organization. It's what we would refer to as a cross-functional discipline. So that's what customer experience management is. Okay, but customer experience itself is arguably nothing to do with the business. Customer experience is the experience of the customer. Okay, where does the customer's experience come from? Well, of course, the experience of the customer comes from customer service, but it doesn't just come from customer service. It also comes from the products that they buy. So you buy a product, you get an experience as a result of that product. And also you interact with the organization through channels. So say, for example, your experience is different whether you call a contact center or whether you go online and you go on the web or whether you go via social media. There are so many different ways of interacting between the organization and the customer. And the customer's experience is affected by every single thing that the organization does. So let's look at it. So it could be a bad advert, okay, a misleading advert, or a pushy salesperson, or the product itself that they've bought, the price that they've paid for the product itself, the service that they receive, the delivery of the product after they've purchased the product. So everything that the organization does has a direct or indirect impact upon the experience of the customer. That's what customer experience is. It's the experience that the customer has, and every single part of the organization can have an impact upon the customer's experience. So when you look at it that way, you can see that there is a clear difference between customer service, which is a functional activity carried out usually by one part of the business, and customer experience, which really isn't anything to do with the business. It's the experience that the customer gets, but their experience is influenced by every single thing that the organization does. So you can't say that customer experience and customer service are the same thing. Customer service is about providing a service to the customer, but the customer's experience might be affected as a result of a bill that they've been sent, which is completely inaccurate. That can have more of an impact on the customer's experience than the service they receive. So let me just give you one more example. If you think about some of the best organizations in the world who are well known for great customer experience, let me give you the example of Amazon, Apple, and Singapore Airlines. Okay. So when you buy an Apple phone, 90% of the positive experience that you get comes from the product. Of course, You do have channel interactions with Apple, and of course you have customer service, but that's not what they're known for. They're not known for the great service that you receive. They're not known for the great channel interactions. They're known mainly for the product itself, the phone. Okay. Then you look at somebody like Amazon. Now, Amazon are mainly known as a result of the channel interactions. Of course, they have customer service, but that's not what they're really famous for. And they sell products, but 99% of the products they sell are not their products, they're other people's products. So the experience, you could buy those products anywhere else. So the experience that you get as a customer comes from the channel, i.e. how easy it is to go onto Amazon.com, find a product, pay for it, and then get it delivered. So 90% of the positive experience that you get from Amazon comes from the channel. And then with Singapore Airlines, 90% of the positive experience you get comes as a result of the customer service that you receive. So you can see you've got three organizations that are well known for offering great customer experience, but one offers the majority of their customer experience comes from the product. One, the majority of the experience comes from the channel, and the other one, the majority of the experience comes from the service. So that's a practical example of why customer experience and customer service are so different to each other. And that is probably the first and most important customer experience principle.
That's an amazing answer. Yeah, like so it becomes so clear in your mind, customer experience and customer service. So what I understand is customer service is like a subset of customer experience. In a way.
Okay, customer service is a subset of customer experience management.
Yeah.
Okay, because customer experience management and customer experience are not the same thing either. Customer experience is the experience of the customer. Customer experience management is how the organization manages the customer experience. Yeah. And the subsets of customer experience management are product, channel, and service.
Okay. So how can we start, we help startups and SMEs in all sectors to successfully align their CX goals with improved top and bottom line performance?
So how can that be achieved? Well, the most important thing is understand who your customers are. That is, at the end of the day, the most important thing. And I think this is where most organizations go wrong. So who are the customers that you're trying to serve? Because you have a product or a service which has certain benefits associated with it. And then on the other hand, you've got potential customers out there. Now, some of the potential customers will be really suited to your proposition, or rather your proposition will be really suited to those customers. But some of the customers would probably be better suited with a proposition from your competition. Because if what you're offering and what your competition are offering are different, then you've got to make sure that what you're really trying to do is match the benefits of your product with the needs of the customer. But of course, you can't make every single customer happy. So what you really need to do is say, okay, these are the benefits. These are our target customers. These are the people who are best suited to our value proposition. Then what you've really got to do is say, okay, if we identified who those customers are, now we need to understand what their current experience is like. So you might need to go out there and do research. There's lots of different feedback activity that organizations do: customer satisfaction, net promoter score, net easy. There are so many different metrics out there. But also, as well as those metrics, there's broader research, so focus groups and large-scale surveys as well, which are also important to understand what your customers want. And then, of course, as an organization, you respond to that feedback in order to design your proposition to best meet their needs. Okay, but there are two different ways of doing this. As organizations, often what you need to do is you need to have a strategic realignment between what your organization does and your target audience. Whereas a lot of the feedback mechanisms that exist nowadays are all what we'd call tactical. So voice of the customer is a perfect example, whereby a customer does a transaction with you. As soon as the transaction is complete, you send them an email saying, what was your experience like? And they provide you with the feedback. Now, of course, that's a very tactical way of looking at it. And what it will do is it will enable you to tweak your service to make it a little bit better. But at a strategic level, what you really need to be doing is, rather than making these little tweaks along the way, what you really need to be doing is saying, do we really understand who our customers are? Do we really understand what they need? And if, although they might be the perfect customers for you, if there is a significant gap between not, what you're delivering and the way you're delivering it today and what their needs are, it isn't enough just to tweak your service. You might have to do some sort of strategic transformation exercise to change what you do fundamentally to make sure that there's the best alignment between your customers' needs and what you deliver as a value proposition. The better that you can create the fit between the needs of your customer and the value proposition, it's a no-brainer. If what you offer meets their needs so much better than any of your competitors, and what you deliver in a way that is really, really good for that customer, they are prepared to spend money, and they're prepared to spend more money. Okay, so that's where fundamentally where the top line performance comes from, the increased sales, because you're offering something that's so much better than your competitors. In terms of the bottom line performance, when we're talking about increasing our profitability, of course, there are two ways of doing that. You either increase your sales or you decrease your costs. Now, decreasing your costs can be a dangerous thing. It isn't always a dangerous thing, but sometimes it can be a dangerous thing. I've known organizations that have created customer experience programs purely with the aim of reducing their costs. If the main aim of your customer experience program is reducing costs, then it will fail, because everybody will be focusing on reducing costs and not on the experience of the customer. Okay. However, if you're clever, you can achieve both at the same time. You can reduce your costs, but at the same time, you can improve the experience that the customer has at the same time. So there are examples that we've seen for years. So self-service on the internet. The bank, I've been with a bank for 25 years. And that bank, 26 years in fact, was the first telephone bank in the UK. Okay. So convenience was that previously, if I wanted to speak to my bank manager, I had to ring up, I had to make an appointment, I had to go down into the town, sit in the manager's office and have a conversation with him. Now, with telephone banking, when telephone banking came along, all I had to do was pick up the phone and call. I'd get through to somebody and I'd be able to have a conversation then and there on the spot. That was so much better for me that I then switched my allegiances. The costs for the organization of having a contact center of people who could manage my problems meant that their costs were significantly lower than having branches all over the country. Because with the branches, you've got buildings, you've got facilities, you've got all of those things that you have to manage. So their costs were lower, but my experience was better. And now, if we think about online banking, everybody does online banking. Yeah. It means you can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do all of your transactions when you want to, and you can do it on this. Now, that is a better experience for me as a customer, because I can do what I want when I want in the way that I want to do it. However, for the organization, because they're providing me access to all of their systems online, their costs are even lower than when they had a telephone bank.
Yeah.
So there is a way of delivering a better experience with reduced costs. But if your main focus is reducing costs, the likelihood is that you won't deliver a better customer experience. So you have to do both things at the same time. So yeah, customer experience will, if you get the customer experience right, you will naturally improve the top line performance. If you get the customer experience right, as long as you get it right, and that is your main priority, depending on how you do it, it will also improve your ability to lower costs as well.
Okay. So, what if companies are not able to reduce costs, but they're able to improve the customer experience? Should they just go for it?
So if companies, right, so let me get that clear. If organizations are not able to reduce costs, but they are able to improve customer experience, should they go for it? It depends on what their objective is. Yeah. I would argue that if you improve the customer experience, but the only way of improving the customer experience is by enormously increasing your costs, then that doesn't make sense from the organization's
Business perspective.
perspective. If the money that you spend on improving the experience is less than the money that you make as a result of improving the experience, then why would you do it? It doesn't make sense from an organization's perspective. But if you can do a customer experience project that improves your profitability as a result of increasing your revenues, but perhaps not decreasing your costs, then that's fine. But you have to make sure that the amount of money that you spend on improving the experience does not outweigh the profit that is generated as a result of improving that experience.
Understood. So, how do business leaders and board members around the world focus on business objectives while organizational silos exist that hinders productivity?
Okay, this is an enormous problem for all businesses. The main problem is that each of the different functions within an organization has different objectives.
Yeah.
So your finance team has different objectives to your sales team, has different objectives to your marketing team. And of course, you want to make those different functions within the business as effective as you possibly can. So of course, they have to have their objectives in place. But at the end of the day, you need to look at the overall objective of the organization. What's the overall objective of the organization? To improve its commercial performance. Okay. Ultimately, profit is the main purpose behind a business. So how do you achieve better profit? Increase sales, lower costs. How do you make that happen? By making sure that you sell more to your existing customers and find new customers. So fundamentally, the main focus of any organization needs to be the customer. That needs to be the center of anything that any business does. So if the customer is the center of anything the business does, the conflict comes in because you've got this customer out there who can give you more money, who will buy more, who
Yeah.
will pay more for an individual product if you get their experience right. And then within the organization, you've got all of the different functions of the business are trying to achieve their own functional business objectives. Sometimes these objectives contradict each other. So the way that we go about getting rid of the functional silos, well, we don't try and get rid of the functional silos because the silos are there for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to create a strategic vision for the organization. So we do that through segmentation. We create strategic segments and say, okay, here's your customer base. Let's break the customer base down into 6 or 7 strategic segments according to the reason why the customer is doing business with you. Okay. So we use machine learning in order that we can identify the different customer segments, and then we understand what their behavior is why they are doing business with you. Okay, now that is undeniable. You go to the finance director and you go to the marketing director and you go to the sales director and say, we've identified that within our customer base, we have 7 different groups of customers. And these 7 different groups of customers have 7 different needs because they are doing business with us for seven different reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
And everybody will go, that's great. That's what we need to focus on. But at the same time as focusing on these customers, these functions have to focus on what they do within their own areas, within their own departments. So what we try and do is what we call functional alignment, whereby we will say, okay, well, let me give you an example. These strategic segments that I've spoken to you about. I worked with one organization who had a loyalty department. Now, if you've flown on an airplane, often you'll have a loyalty card, a gold, silver, bronze membership. So I went to the loyalty department and said, hey, look, we've got these new strategic segments. Reasons why people, it was an airline, reasons why people are flying with your airline. Okay. You have business travelers and leisure travelers. And then within the leisure travelers, you've got vacationers, weekend breakers, weekday breakers, etc., visiting friends and relatives, lots of different reasons why customers are traveling with you. Within the business community, within the business customers, you've got standard business travelers, frequent business travelers, business commuters was one. The business commuter is somebody who flies to work on a Monday morning. They fly to a different place. They work there from Monday to Friday, and then Friday they fly home to go back to their families. That's what a business commuter is. So I then go to the loyalty department and say, hey, look, we've got these new strategic segments. You should use these. And the loyalty department go, no, we've already got our segments, gold, silver, bronze. Go away, we're not interested. Now, if every function of the business said the same thing, these strategic segments that we know are relevant are not going to be adopted by the different functions of the business. So what I had to do is I had to go to the loyalty department and said, look, rather than taking the entire customer base and breaking it down into gold, silver, bronze, non-members, why don't I give you this strategic segment of business commuters, which is just one part of the entire customer base. You take that strategic segment and then you apply your gold, silver, bronze to that strategic segment. And they went, okay, yeah, so we're going to try and use a functional segmentation approach and a strategic segmentation approach alongside each other. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. So the loyalty department said, okay, so you want us to apply our functional segmentation approach, but use that alongside a strategic segmentation approach that you're providing. So rather than functionally segmenting the entire customer base, we will functionally segment these strategic segments. And there's a lot of detail, a lot more that I could tell you about this, but as a result of getting them to align their functional approach alongside the strategic approach, not only were we able to get all of the different functions of the business to focus on the customer in the right way, but we were able to help each function of the business improve their functional performance. So there has to be a trade-off. You have to be able to say, the customer experience for many years have been going, oh, the rest of the business isn't listening to us. Why aren't they listening to us? They're doing their own thing. It's their fault. It isn't their fault. What customer experience people need to do is make sure that what they are trying to achieve is relevant, not only to the customers, but is relevant to the different functions of the business. You have to be able to present customer experience in such a way so that it's a win-win. The customers win because each of the functions of the business is looking at the customer in the same way, but also as a result of introducing this new strategic approach, we are helping each of the functions of the business improve their performance.
That's a great perspective. Makes sense. So what are some of the barriers in customer research and analytics that, and customer identification? What are the main barriers in these three areas?
Um, the main, gosh, well, one of the main barriers, there are so many different barriers that happen within customer experience. Okay. I think probably the biggest barrier is what we spoke about previously, which is, first of all, a lot of organizations don't understand the difference between customer experience and customer service. That's an enormous problem for a lot of organizations. Okay. If we break this down in a more granular level, from a customer research perspective, one of the problems that I see on a regular basis, a lot of organizations do customer research and then they don't do anything with it afterwards.
Oh,
I see this so much where people do customer satisfaction surveys and they go, oh, look, our customers are really unhappy at the moment. And then they don't do anything. They do nothing with it. Or I've seen organizations doing customer journey mapping to identify where the pain points and the moments of truth are. And they do this journey mapping exercise and they create a beautiful picture that they stick on the wall. And then they don't do anything with it because they miss the fact that customer journey mapping isn't about creating a map. A map is a byproduct of the exercise. The reason why you're doing customer journey mapping is to identify pain points, moments of truth, wow opportunities, and commercial opportunities that you use to then transform your business moving forward. Okay. So most people who do some kind of customer experience research activity are not doing anything with the output. So those are the first two things. First of all, people don't understand the difference between customer experience and customer service. Secondly, they don't do anything with the output that they get from the research activity. The third one, and I think this is the most important one of all, is data. Okay. A lot of organizations will create customer experience strategies, but because they do it in a particular way, they have no way of tying. So say you've got 7 segments.
okay.
And you've got 7 different treatment strategies for those 7 different segments. The problem is you've got 1 million customers. How do you decide which of your customers belongs to which segment? That happens all of the time because there are people who create their strategies and it's a paper exercise because they have no way of saying this customer belongs to this segment. And that's largely to do with misalignment between your strategy and what you're doing in reality through your CRM system, for example. And a lot of it is because the quality of the data that organizations have within their CRM systems is terrible. Or often information will be spread across the organization. It will be held in 5 different areas by 5 different groups of people, but they're not sharing information with each other. All the information should be consolidated into one area so that everybody has the same information about the customers. But it isn't just about gathering information, it's also about cleaning the information as well. So you have to have relevant data in a central area that is gives you a complete picture of your customer as far as all areas of business are concerned, but with data that is clean. So any irrelevant data has to be taken out as well, because old data that's no longer relevant is, we see what's happening now with GDPR. If you don't have the right information, if you don't have the right data, it can cause you as a problem as an organization. Yeah. So the biggest roadblocks for me are misunderstanding between customer experience and customer service, people doing research and then not doing nothing with the output, and then the third one is data. The fact that either data quality is incomplete, or it is old, or there is no relationship between the practicalities of the data that you hold and the strategy that you're trying to carry out. because all of they need to be completely aligned.
What about like you were speaking about data? So what about the bias that sometimes exists in data? Is there any way to counter that?
A lot of the bias, well, it depends what you mean by data, because there is, if you use transactional data, then it's based on facts, and there's no bias. The data is the data. Yeah. If you can decide whether a customer bought an apple or a banana. You can see that within the data. There is no bias. It's just telling you the truth. Okay. But if you're talking about data where you go to customers and you ask them their opinion,
Yeah.
right? They give you their opinion. Their opinion can be biased. Okay. And
Yeah.
there are ways in which you can eliminate bias as much as you possibly can as far as opinions concerned. But this is the danger of using if we say, for example, if we compare different types of data, psychographic data and behavioral data. Okay. So behavioral data is what customers do. It's factual. It's true. You can't deny it. You know whether the customer bought an apple or a banana. There's no bias in that
Bias.
whatsoever. But with psychographic data, you have to be really careful, because sometimes you can ask people what they think, and what they think can be completely different to what they do. So there's a really good example of this. So years and years ago, they did a study of people commuting on the train because people commute into London every day, and they travel from miles, from little towns and villages outside of London into the middle of London.
Yeah.
And what they did, and also within London, you've got the tube stations, the underground stations. And what they did is they did a survey of people at the underground stations saying, when you get on the train, what newspaper do you buy? Okay. And most of the customers said, well, I buy the Times, which is a very formal, highbrow,
Yeah.
intellectual newspaper. Okay. And the Times is a very, it's a popular paper, but in reality, the paper that sold more was the Sun. Now, the Sun is a tabloid newspaper. It's full of gossip. Okay. Now, the people getting on the trains, 2/3 of them were saying, I read the Times, and 1/3 of them were saying, I read the Sun. But then when they looked at actual data, they found that only 1/3 of them were buying the Times, and
Okay.
2/3 of them were buying the Sun.
Sun.
Because the reality is that they wanted people to think, oh, I associate myself with the Sun.
Yeah.
Even though I associate myself with the Times, even though the reality was that they were buying the Sun. So I think it's important that we use aspirational data and opinion-based data, but I think what's more important is that you bring data from various different sources so that you can try and eliminate as much bias as you possibly can. Because the reality is if you compare the facts associated with behavioral data versus psychographic data or opinion-based data, they don't match. So try and get as much of your data factually based as you possibly can, would be the thing that I would advise. That of course, if you're doing something like customer research, that doesn't always work. Okay. But there are, without getting into statistical detail, there are ways of eliminating bias. And as researchers, we have to also make sure that we're asking the right questions. Because if we phrase the question in the wrong way, we could be introducing bias that shouldn't exist.
Correct. Yeah. So my final question to you is like, so are there any other sound bites you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, in terms of technology, I think the thing that I'm most interested in at the moment is technology within the customer experience space. I've worked with a number of different technology companies, and I'm not a fan of the word solution, because very often solutions are not solutions. Okay. Platforms are not solutions, they are tools. Okay. What often happens is that if you're a manager within an organization, you've got a problem that you need to solve. So what you do is you have two different options. You can go and employ some consultants who are very expensive, or you can go out and buy a piece of technology. Okay. So what often they do is they go, well, I could employ these consultants, but at the end of it, I've spent a lot of money and I don't have anything to show. There is nothing physical or tangible there. So what they do instead is they say, well, we won't work with the consultants. What we'll do is we'll go to the technology company. But technology companies often will try and get in and out as quickly as possible. So they sell a solution, but if the solution is not implemented in the right way, then all of a sudden you get customers 12 months after they've bought the solution turning around and saying, we're not going to renew our contract because the solution's not doing what we needed to do. So there are some amazing technological tools out there that do great stuff. But I think the technology companies need to make sure that the tools are being implemented in the right way in order to deliver what the customer needs. And sometimes it isn't just saying to the customer, how do you want this solution to be implemented? Because sometimes customers don't know how they want the solution to be implemented. They know that a solution can help them solve the problem, but they don't know how to implement it to meet their needs. So nowadays, technology companies are working more and more with people like me in order that I can go through the door and say, look, we'd love to sell you this piece of technology, but before we sell you the piece of technology, we need to understand what your business objectives are. If we understand what your business objectives are, that will have an impact upon the strategy that we build. And then the strategy we build needs to be reflected in the way that the solution is implemented. So for me, the big soundbite is solutions are only solutions if they're implemented properly. And they are only implemented properly if you have alignment between the organization's strategy and the objectives that the organization is trying to achieve.
Thank you, Ian. That was
No
amazing.
problem.
So thank you so much for giving us your time, and your insights were really valuable. And I know our audience is really going to enjoy this interview.
Thank you.
So folks, we'll be back with a new episode and a new expert soon. So stay tuned and see you around for the next one.